Maya made it exactly 7 blocks from the Bellevue mansion before the Han twins caught her. She was running through the November rain in stolen clothes and bare feet, her lungs burning and her dark skin slick with water and fear, when the black SUV cut across her path and Miho stepped out like a dark angel of retribution. She tried to pivot, tried to disappear into the maze of Seattle's streets the way her father had taught her. But Taejun was already behind her, his hand closing around her arm with a grip that was gentle and absolutely inescapable at the same time. 3 hours, Miho said, walking toward her with his hands in his pockets and rain plastering his black hair to his forehead. He spoke in Korean, his voice carrying over the storm. You made it 3 hours before you ran. I told Taejun you'd last at least 6. You just cost me $10,000, Maya. Maya jerked against Taejun's hold, her voice coming out ragged and desperate. You kidnapped me. You can't be surprised that I tried to leave. Kidnapped. Taejun's breath was warm against her ear as he pulled her back against his chest. Is that what you think this is? He turned her around to face him, both brothers now flanking her in the rain-soaked alley. We didn't kidnap you, Maya. We saved you. There are 5 different organizations looking for your father's daughter right now, and 3 of them want you dead. You ran away from the only men in this city who are willing to die to keep you breathing. Miho stepped closer, his hand coming up to cup her jaw. Now you're going to get back in that car, you're going to come home with us, and you're going to stop breaking our hearts by treating us like we're the enemy. Because when the real enemies come, and they will come, you're going to need us to be the monsters your father taught you to fear. Maya looked between them, at the genuine emotion in their identical faces, and felt something crack inside her chest. What if I don't want to need you? Too late, they said in unison. And Maya realized that running from the Han twins was like running from her own shadow. Pointless, exhausting, and destined to fail. Hello besties, Happy New Year. Welcome to Afro-Korean Stories. Please like, share and subscribe. Also turn on the notification button so you won't miss out on more intense stories like this. The story of how Maya Rodriguez ended up running barefoot through Seattle's rain-soaked streets began 3 days earlier, in a place where expensive whiskey and calculated malice hung in the air like perfume. The Jade Room was the kind of establishment where powerful men came to pretend they were civilized, where deals worth millions were made over single malt scotch, and where Maya had spent the last 5 years learning to be invisible. At 26, her dark skin and careful composure made her the perfect ghost. She moved through the dimly lit lounge with practiced grace, her eyes trained to see everything while appearing to see nothing. She had learned early that survival meant being forgettable, that drawing attention in a place like this was like throwing blood in shark-infested waters. The November air outside was biting, Seattle's famous fog rolling in from Puget Sound like a living thing, but inside the Jade Room the atmosphere was suffocating for different reasons. Maya smoothed her silk uniform as she approached table 7, her heart already starting that familiar hammer rhythm she had learned to ignore. The Han twins had arrived 20 minutes ago, and the entire room had gone quiet in that particular way. That meant dangerous men had entered the space. Miho and Taejun Han didn't just enter a room. They consumed the oxygen in it. At 30 years old, they were the heirs to the Han Syndicate, a shadow empire that stretched from the tech corridors of Seoul to the deep water ports of Incheon. They were identical in their devastating beauty, all sharp jawlines and eyes like polished obsidian, moving with the kind of predatory grace that made Maya's instincts scream danger. But where Miho was fire and impulse, Taejun was ice and calculation. Together, they were unstoppable. They had taken the corner booth, the one with clear sight lines to every exit, and the room had reorganized itself around their presence. Businessmen lowered their voices. The pianist adjusted his repertoire to something softer. Even the bartender moved with more caution. Maya had served them twice before over the years, always with the same careful neutrality, always making sure they never really saw her. But tonight felt different. Tonight the air was electric with a tension she couldn't name. She approached their table with a tray of crystal glasses, her face a mask of professional courtesy. Good evening, gentlemen. Can I start you with something to drink? Miho leaned back in his seat, his expensive suit jacket open just enough to reveal the edge of a shoulder holster. He didn't look at her when he spoke. Single malt neat. His voice was smooth, almost pleasant, but Maya had learned to read the dangerous undercurrents. I was just telling my brother that the service in this city has become lackluster. It's hard to find someone who knows their place anymore. Maya poured the whiskey with steady hands, her movements precise. She had heard worse from better men. The key was to remain silent, to finish the service and disappear. But then Miho switched to Korean, his tone dripping with casual contempt, and every muscle in Maya's body went rigid. "Look at her," he said in rapid Korean, the words flowing like silk over steel. "Like a well-trained dog. Silent, dark, and utterly obedient. They all have that look, don't they? Like they're just waiting for a command because they don't have a thought of their own. Probably can't even understand what we're saying." Taejun didn't laugh, but his silence felt like agreement. He was studying Maya with those analytical eyes, as if trying to find the flaw in her composure. Maya's hand didn't shake as she set down the bottle, but inside her something ancient and fierce was igniting. Her father's voice echoed in her memory, from all those nights when he had drilled the language into her before he disappeared. Korean is a map to a person's soul, Mija. Once you understand the map, you can never be lost. But more importantly, you can never be disrespected without knowing it. She had spent 15 years hiding who she was, running from the shadow of her father's past. Mitch Rodriguez, or whatever his real name had been a government linguist who spoke 7 languages fluently. He had taught her Korean before she could ride a bike, taught her the rough Incheon dialect he had picked up during his years undercover in South Korea. He had taught her that language was power, and then he had vanished into the darkness, leaving only warnings and a silver ring she kept hidden. Maya set the whiskey bottle down with deliberate care. The silence in the booth was expectant, almost mocking. Miho reached out, his fingers grazing the back of her hand as he took his glass, a gesture designed to assert dominance. "Stay close, sweetheart," he said in English, his eyes finally meeting hers with casual dismissal. "We might need something else to keep us entertained." The words hung in the air for exactly 3 heartbeats. Maya felt every carefully constructed wall she had built around herself crack and then shatter. She had spent 5 years being invisible, 5 years swallowing insults and indignities, 5 years being safe. But safety had never been freedom. Safety had been a prison she had built herself. She leaned in, close enough that both brothers could see the fury in her dark eyes. And when she spoke, it was in flawless Korean, seasoned with the rough aggressive lilt of an Incheon shipyard worker. The accent her father had taught her. The one that marked her as someone from the streets, someone who had seen the underbelly of Korea's glittering cities. "I'm not a dog," Maya said, her voice low and cutting. "And I certainly don't take commands from men who use their tongues to hide the fact that they have no spine." She met Miho's shocked gaze without flinching. "If you want entertainment, go to a circus. If you want a drink, shut your mouth and show some respect for the hands that feed you. Because right now you aren't the hunters. You're just 2 loudmouth boys in expensive suits who think money makes them men." The world stopped. The ice in Miho's glass seemed to freeze mid-melt. Taejun's eyes went wide, genuine shock breaking through his carefully controlled exterior. At the tables around them, conversations died. Forks stopped midway to mouths. The pianist's hands stumbled over the keys. The silence was so absolute that Maya could hear her own heartbeat thundering in her ears. Miho stood slowly, his considerable height looming over her. But he didn't look angry. He looked fascinated, the way a scientist might look at a new and dangerous species. He reached out, his hand wrapping around the back of Maya's neck, his thumb pressing against her pulse point. The touch was possessive, threatening, and somehow intimate all at once. "What did you just say to me?" His voice was barely above a whisper, but it carried the weight of violence. "I think you heard me clearly," Maya replied, forcing her voice to remain steady even as her heart threatened to beat out of her chest. "Or do I need to repeat it in a dialect your grandmother would understand?" Miho's grip tightened, not enough to bruise but enough to remind her that he could snap her neck with a single twist. His face was so close to hers that she could see the flecks of gold in his dark eyes, could smell the expensive cologne mixing with something more primal. "You have no idea what you've just done." "I know exactly what I've done." Maya's voice dropped to match his. "I've reminded you that I'm a human being, not a dog, not a servant. A woman who speaks your language better than you speak it yourself." Taejun rose from his seat, his presence somehow even more commanding than his brother's. He looked at the manager, who was approaching with a face drained of all color. "She's finished for the night," Taejun said, his voice leaving absolutely no room for argument. Don't bother with her final paycheck. We'll be taking care of her from here on out. You can't do that, the manager stammered, though everyone in the room knew it was a lie. The Han twins could do whatever they wanted in this city. We can do whatever we want, Miho said, his eyes never leaving Maya's face. He leaned down, his lips brushing against her ear in a gesture that made her skin prickle with unwanted heat. We will never set you free after this, Maya Rodriguez. You've made yourself the most interesting thing in this city, and we don't like to lose our toys. He released her neck and pulled a stack of $100 bills from his jacket, throwing them onto the table with casual disregard. Then his hand was on her arm, not dragging but guiding, with a firmness that made it clear resistance would be futile. Maya didn't fight. She had seen enough of the world to know that fighting predators only made them more excited. She looked back at the room one last time, at the people who had watched her for 5 years without ever really seeing her, and realized that her life of invisibility had just ended in a spectacular blaze of defiance. The black SUV was waiting at the back in trance, rain starting to fall in heavy sheets. Maya's mind was racing, calculating escape routes and weighing options, but Miho's grip on her arm was unbreakable. Taejun opened the rear door, and Maya found herself being guided into the leather interior with both brothers flanking her immediately. The door closed with a sound like a vault ceiling, and the SUV pulled away from the jade room with the smooth efficiency of a well-executed kidnapping. The silence inside the vehicle was suffocating. Maya sat between them, hyper-aware of the heat radiating from their bodies. The way they both seemed to be studying her with an intensity that made her want to crawl out of her own skin. Neither spoke for the first few minutes as Seattle's lights blurred past the tinted windows. Who taught you? Taejun finally asked, his voice quiet and analytical. He wasn't looking at her, but she could feel the weight of his attention. The Korean. That's not something you learn from an app or a university course. That's native speaker fluency with an Incheon dockworker's accent. Who taught you? Maya considered lying, but something told her that these men would know. They hadn't built an empire by being easy to fool. My father, she said, her voice carefully neutral. He believed that knowing a language was the only way to truly understand an enemy. And are we your enemy, Maya? Miho asked, finally speaking. He had shifted in his seat so he was facing her, one arm stretched along the back of the seat behind her head. Is that what tonight was about? Déclaring va. You're men who think money and blood make you gods, Maya said, turning to meet his gaze. In my world, that's exactly what an enemy looks like. Miho laughed, a genuine sound that seemed to surprise even his brother. I like her, Taejun. She's got teeth. Teeth can be pulled, Taejun said, but there was something in his voice that contradicted the coldness of his words. A curiosity, maybe even a spark of respect. But I'd rather understand why a waitress at the Jade Room speaks Korean like she was born in the salt markets of Incheon. Your father, who was he really? Maya stayed silent, and Taejun seemed to accept that as answer enough for now. The SUV climbed into the hills above Seattle, the rain hammering against the windows like 1,000 tiny fists. They passed through security gates that hissed open and closed behind them, climbing higher until they reached an estate that looked like it had been carved from glass and steel and money. The mansion overlooked the city like a crown overlooking its kingdom, every light inside making it glow like a beacon against the storm. They led her through hallways that smelled of expensive wood and fresh flowers, past rooms that looked like they belonged in architectural magazines, until they reached a suite on the top floor. Miho opened the door and stepped aside, gesturing for her to enter. Maya walked in, her wet shoes leaving dark prints on the pristine carpet, and found herself in a space that was larger than her entire apartment. Floor-to-ceiling windows looked out over Seattle's glittering skyline. The furniture was modern and expensive, all clean lines and soft fabrics. There was a massive bed, a sitting area, a bathroom visible through an open door that looked like it belonged in a spa. It was beautiful and terrifying all at once, a gilded cage that didn't even pretend to be anything else. This is where you'll stay, Taejun said, walking to the center of the room. His suit was slightly damp from the rain, and he shrugged out of his jacket with casual grace. You'll find clothes in your size in the closet. Food will be brought to you. If you need anything, there's a phone on the nightstand that connects directly to our private line. I'm a prisoner, Maya said flatly. You're a guest, Miho corrected, moving to stand beside his brother. Together, They created a wall of masculine presence that seemed to fill the entire room. A guest who has made herself incredibly interesting to very dangerous people. You're the dangerous people, Maya shot back. No, Taejun said, his voice dropping into something darker. We're the ones keeping you safe from the dangerous people. There's a difference. Maya wrapped her arms around herself, suddenly aware of how cold she was in her damp uniform. Why? Just because I insulted you in Korean? Your egos can't be that fragile. It's not about the insult, Taejun said, stepping closer. He moved like a predator, all controlled grace and lethal intent. It's about the fact that when you spoke, you sounded exactly like our grandmother. She's been dead for 10 years, but for a moment, when you told us to shut our mouths, I heard her voice. Miho moved to flank her other side, and Maya suddenly felt like prey caught between two wolves. Our grandmother was the only person who ever dared to tell us the truth, he said, his voice softening with something that might have been grief. She told us that one day we would find a woman who wouldn't bow, who wouldn't break, who would look at us and see the men behind the monsters. She said that woman would be our salvation or our destruction. Which one am I? Maya whispered, her pulse hammering against her throat. We haven't decided yet, Taejun said. He reached out, his fingers brushing a strand of wet hair away from her face with surprising gentleness. But we're going to have a lot of time to figure it out, because like my brother said, we will never set you free. The door closed behind them as they left, and Maya heard the distinct sound of a lock engaging. She stood in the center of the luxurious prison, her mind racing through possibilities and escape routes, but exhaustion was creeping in at the edges. She walked to the window and pressed her hand against the cold glass, looking out at the city spread below like a constellation of broken promises. I'm sorry, Papa, she whispered in Korean, her breath fogging the glass. I tried to stay hidden, but I think I've just walked into the heart of the storm. She didn't cry. Crying was a luxury she couldn't afford. Instead, she walked to the closet and found it filled with clothes in her exact size, designer labels and silk and cashmere. They had been planning this, or at least planning for someone like her. The realization sent ice through her veins. This wasn't a spontaneous kidnapping. This was calculated, precise, and terrifyingly well prepared. Maya stripped out of her wet uniform and found a robe, wrapping it around herself like armor. She needed to think, needed to plan, but her mind kept circling back to the way Miho had looked at her when she spoke Korean. The way Taejun's analytical mask had cracked for just a moment. They weren't just dangerous. They were complicated, and complicated men were the most dangerous of all. She must have fallen asleep at some point because when she opened her eyes again, pale gray light was filtering through the windows, and someone was in the room with her. Maya jerked awake, her hand instinctively reaching for a weapon she didn't have, and found Miho sitting in the armchair by the window. He was watching her with an expression she couldn't read, a cup of coffee steaming in his hands. Easy, he said in Korean, his voice rough with exhaustion. I'm not here to hurt you. I've been here all night, actually, making sure you didn't try to break the window and climb down 3 stories in the rain. You've been watching me sleep? Maya demanded, pulling the robe tighter around herself. Someone had to, Miho said with a shrug. You tried to run twice in your sleep. Kept muttering in Korean about tigers and bridges. Nightmares. Maya didn't answer. She wasn't about to give these men any more ammunition than they already had. She sat up, pushing her hair out of her face, and tried to orient herself. Morning. She had been here one night. That meant her manager had certainly noticed her absence by now, which meant the police might be involved, which meant, don't bother, Miho said as if reading her thoughts. Your manager reported that you quit abruptly last night, took your final paycheck, and said you were leaving the city. As far as Seattle is concerned, Maya Rodriguez decided to start over somewhere else. The casual way he said it, the ease with which they had erased her from her own life, made Maya's stomach turn. You can't just make me disappear. We already did. Miho set down his coffee and stood, stretching like a cat. He was dressed more casually now, dark jeans and a black sweater that somehow made him look even more dangerous. The question is what happens next. Taejun is downstairs making breakfast. You should eat. We have a lot to discuss. I'm not hungry. You haven't eaten since your shift started yesterday, which was over 12 hours ago, Miho said, his tone leaving no room for argument. You're going to eat, and then we're going to have a conversation about who your father really was, and why a linguist's daughter speaks Korean like she spent her childhood in the roughest parts of Incheon. He walked to the door and paused, looking back at her. You can come downstairs willingly, or I can carry you. Your choice. But either way, we're having this conversation. Maya weighed her options and realized she had very few. She was 3 stories up in a mansion surrounded by security, with no phone and no allies. Fighting now would be pointless. Better to gather information, to understand what these men wanted, and then find her opening. Give me 10 minutes, she said. Miho smiled, and it transformed his face from dangerous to devastating. Take 15. The bathroom has everything you need. There's a toothbrush still in the package, and I think you'll find the shower pressure is excellent. He left, and this time Maya heard the lock click open. They were giving her the illusion of freedom, or maybe testing to see if she would run. She walked to the bathroom and found it exactly as promised, all marble and chrome and luxury. She showered quickly, the hot water helping to clear her head, and found fresh clothes laid out on the counter. Dark jeans, a soft sweater, comfortable shoes. Nothing too feminine or revealing, which surprised her. When she made her way downstairs 15 minutes later, following the sound of conversation and the smell of food, she found the twins in a kitchen that looked like it belonged in a cooking show. Taejun was at the stove, somehow making the domestic act of cooking look dangerous, while Miho leaned against the counter with his phone in hand. They both looked up when she entered, and the weight of their combined attention made her want to turn and run. Sit, Taejun said, gesturing to the island where plates were already set out. I made dakjuk, our grandmother's recipe. Maya found herself sitting despite her intention to remain standing. The porridge was traditional Korean, chicken and rice cooked until soft, seasoned with ginger and sesame oil. The smell alone made her stomach clench with unexpected hunger, and even more unexpected nostalgia. Her father had made this for her when she was sick as a child. She ate in silence while the twins watched her, and Maya forced herself to take her time, to not show weakness by devouring the food even though she was starving. When she was done, Taejun collected her bowl, and Miho set a cup of tea in front of her. Now, Taejun said, sitting across from her while Miho remained standing, let's talk about Mitch Rodriguez. Or should I say Mitch Park? Maya's blood went cold. They knew. Somehow, they knew her father's real name. The Korean name he had abandoned when he fled to the United States over 15 years ago. She kept her face carefully neutral. I don't know what you're talking about. Don't lie to us, Maya, Miho said, his voice gentle but firm. We've spent the last 6 hours digging into your background. Mitch Rodriguez doesn't exist before 15 years ago. But Mitch Park, he exists in a lot of very interesting files. He was a linguist, yes, but not for the government. He worked for the Han Syndicate. The room tilted sideways. Maya gripped the edge of the counter, her knuckles going white. That's impossible. It's the truth, Taejun said, pulling out a tablet and sliding it across to her. On the screen was a photo she had never seen before, her father younger and harder looking, standing next to an older Korean man in what looked like a warehouse. He was one of our father's most trusted advisors. He managed translations, negotiations, helped expand our operations into South America. And then 15 years ago, he stole something very valuable from us and disappeared. Maya stared at the photo, her entire world cracking apart. Her father hadn't been a hero working undercover. He had been one of them. He had been part of the very world she had spent her life trying to avoid. What did he steal? A ledger, Miho said. Digital files containing the access codes to the Han family's offshore accounts. Billions of dollars that we couldn't touch because the encryption required his biometric data to unlock. When he ran, he took our entire legacy with him. And you think I have it? Maya looked up at them, anger starting to burn through the shock. I was 10 years old when he disappeared. He left me and my mother with nothing. If he had billions of dollars, don't you think he would have used some of it? We don't think you have the files, Taejun said. We know you are the files. Or more specifically, you're the key to accessing them. He tapped something on the tablet, and a new image appeared. It was the silver dragon ring Maya kept hidden in a box under her bed. Her heart stopped. They had been in her apartment. They had gone through her things. That ring belonged to our grandfather, Taejun continued. It's not just jewelry. It's a biometric key, combined with a blood sample from someone in the Park family line. It opens a specific vault in Incheon, a vault your father sealed before he fled. I don't understand, Maya whispered, but she was starting to. The pieces were clicking into place in a pattern that made her want to scream. Your father didn't just steal from us, Miho said, moving closer. He encrypted our entire legacy and locked it behind a door that only his bloodline can open. He knew we would eventually find you. He knew we would need you. The question is, did he do it to protect you or to weaponize you? Maya stood abruptly, the chair scraping against the floor. So what? You're going to force me to open this vault? Is that what this is? You kidnap me, feed me breakfast, and then drag me to Korea to be your key? Yes, Taejun said simply. But not by force. We're going to make you an offer. I don't want your offer. You haven't heard it yet, Miho said. He moved to block her path to the door, not threateningly but firmly. We open the vault, retrieve what's ours, and in exchange we give you answers. Every question you have about your father, about why he ran, about what he was really doing in Korea. We'll give you the truth, Maya. All of it. And what if I refuse? Maya demanded. What if I'd rather die than help you? Then you'll die, Taejun said, his voice carrying no emotion. But not before watching everyone you've ever cared about die first. Your mother in that nursing home in Portland. Your friend Jessica who manages the coffee shop on Pike Street. The elderly neighbor who taught you to garden. We've mapped your entire life, Maya. Every connection. Every person you smile at. Every place you feel safe. If you refuse us, we'll dismantle your world piece by piece until you beg us to let you open that vault. The threat hung in the air like poison. Maya looked at Taejun's cold eyes, at Miho's sympathetic but unyielding expression, and understood with perfect clarity that they weren't bluffing. These men had the resources and the ruthlessness to do exactly what they promised. Her defiance at the Jade Room hadn't bought her freedom. It had bought her a different kind of prison, one where the bars were made of other people's lives. When do we leave? Maya asked, her voice hollow. Tonight, Miho said. We have a private jet waiting. The flight to Incheon is 13 hours. You'll be sedated for most of it, for your comfort and ours. How generous, Maya said bitterly. We're not monsters, Maya, Taejun said, standing. We're businessmen retrieving stolen property. Your father made you part of this game. We're just playing by his rules. My father is dead, Maya said, the words tasting like ash. Is he? Miho's question made her head snap up. Are you sure? Because we've never found a body. We've never found any evidence that Mitch Park died. What we found was a trail that went cold in Portland 15 years ago, right around the time a 10-year-old girl and her mother started a new life under a new name. The implication stole the breath from Maya's lungs. All these years, she had believed her father was dead, killed by the same shadowy world he had been investigating. But what if he wasn't? What if he had abandoned them deliberately, used them as cover while he disappeared with stolen fortune? The betrayal cut deeper than any knife. Get some rest, Taejun said, his voice gentler now. We leave at sunset. Marcus will bring you something to help you sleep on the plane. Don't fight it, Maya. The next few days are going to be difficult enough without exhausting yourself with futile resistance. They left her alone in the kitchen, and Maya sank back into the chair. She had walked into the Jade Room yesterday as a waitress trying to survive. She would leave Seattle tonight as a prisoner, a key, and possibly the daughter of a man who had betrayed everyone including his own family. Her hands were shaking as she picked up the tea Miho had made, and she thought about her father's last words to her before he disappeared. If they ever find you, Mija, don't use the language to fight. Use it to weave a web. If you can't outrun the tigers, you must make them believe you are the one holding the leash. At the time, she had been too young to understand. Now sitting in a mansion that felt like a tomb, Maya began to see the shape of her father's final lesson. He hadn't taught her Korean to help her hide. He had taught her Korean to help her survive the moment hiding failed. And if these men thought she was just a passive key to their vault, they were about to learn that Mitch Park's daughter had inherited more than just his language skills. She had inherited his ability to play a long game in a world where losing meant death. The rest of the day passed in a strange suspended reality. Maya was allowed to move through certain parts of the mansion, always with a guard shadowing her at a discreet distance. She found a library filled with books in multiple languages, a gym that looked like it belonged in a luxury hotel, and a garden that somehow existed on what must have been a rooftop, complete with a small koi pond. It was beautiful and suffocating all at once. Miho found her by the pond in the late afternoon, watching the fish move through the water in lazy circles. He sat down beside her without asking permission, close enough that she could feel the warmth of him in the cooling air. "They're beautiful, aren't they?" he said in Korean. "Taejun had this installed 3 years ago. He said we needed something living in this place, something that couldn't judge us." "Do you need that?" Maya asked, not looking at him. "Something that can't judge you? Everyone needs that," Miho replied. "Even people who pretend they don't care what others think." He was quiet for a moment, watching the koi. "My grandmother used to say that fish are lucky because they can't drown in their own element. They're always exactly where they're supposed to be." "And where am I supposed to be?" Maya asked, finally turning to look at him. Miho met her gaze, and for a moment she saw something raw and almost vulnerable in his eyes. "I think you're supposed to be here. I think your father knew that one day you would end up with us, and he prepared you for it. The language, the accent, even the defiance. He was training you to survive us. Or to destroy you," Maya said. "Maybe both," Miho acknowledged. "But for what it's worth, I'm glad you're here. You're the first real thing that's happened to us in years. Everything else is just business, transactions, power plays. But you looked at us and saw something true, even if what you saw was ugly." "You are ugly," Maya said, "but there was less venom in it than before. You and your brother. You think you can take whatever you want just because you have the money and the muscle to do it." "We can," Miho said simply. "That's not arrogance, Maya. It's reality. But what we want from you isn't something that can be taken. Not really. We want you to choose us." "You kidnapped me." "We saved you," Miho corrected. "There's a difference even if you can't see it yet." He stood, brushing off his jeans. "The car leaves in 2 hours. Marcus will bring your sedative. I'd recommend taking it. The flight is long, and fighting consciousness for 13 hours will only make you miserable." He walked away, leaving Maya alone with the koi and her spiraling thoughts. She should be planning an escape, should be fighting harder, but exhaustion was creeping into her bones. And underneath the fear and anger, there was a small treacherous part of her that was curious. Curious about the vault, about her father's secrets, about these men who had upended her entire world in a single night. She returned to her room as the sun began to set, painting Seattle in shades of orange and gold. A black dress had been laid out on her bed, elegant and appropriate for travel. There was also a small pill and a note in Taejun's precise handwriting. "This will help you sleep. No side effects except vivid dreams. We'll be with you the entire flight. You're safe with us, even if you don't believe it yet." Maya stared at the pill for a long time. Taking it felt like surrender, like accepting her new reality. But refusing it felt like pointless rebellion that would only make the next 13 hours torture. In the end, pragmatism won. She changed into the dress, braided her hair, and swallowed the pill with water from the bathroom sink. Marcus, a man who looked like he had been carved from granite, came to collect her 30 minutes later. He was professional and polite, treating her more like a VIP than a prisoner, which somehow made everything worse. The SUV was waiting in the circular drive, and both twins were already inside. The ride to the private airfield was quiet. Maya felt the sedative starting to work, her limbs growing heavy and her thoughts turning sluggish. By the time they boarded the jet, a sleek monster of luxury and technology, she was barely able to walk. Miho caught her when she stumbled on the stairs, lifting her easily and carrying her to a wide seat that looked more like a bed than airline furniture. "Sleep, Maya," he murmured, settling her against pillows that smelled like lavender. "When you wake up, you'll be in Korea. You'll be home." Hello, besties. You're not going to want to miss a single second of what's coming up. But before we dive into what happened next, and so you don't miss any of the twists, turns, and intense moments that set the stage for all the drama unfolding now, hit the subscribe button and that notification bell so you're the first to know when we drop the next story. You definitely don't want to miss what's coming next.